You evicted your own son? Aaron's voice cracked. Judy stared him down. I evicted 2 strangers who lived off my silence. Heather lunged, raging, rehearsed. A police cruiser pulled up. Doors opened. Judy handed over the papers. You called me old. I was just outgrowing you. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a mother's reckoning. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Eugene, Oregon. Judy's home, repurposed by others, memory tucked into corners. The balloon arch was too much. Judy Myers stood near the kitchen doorway, holding a paper plate of untouched carrot cake, while 30 or so people packed her once quiet living room. The furniture had changed. Sleek gray sectional, baby-safe corners, minimalist prints. Heather's fingerprints were everywhere. The old maple rocker, the bookshelf Charles had made, the Afghan throw she'd knit for Aaron when he was 10, gone, replaced, erased. Across the room, her grandson toddled toward a pile of tissue paper and toy chaos, face smeared with frosting, squealing with the kind of joy that didn't know what it was missing yet. Judy smiled softly. Then came Heather. Smile, Grandma, she chirped, sweeping in close for a hug as someone aimed a phone for photos. Judy stiffened slightly but allowed the embrace. The scent of expensive floral perfume clashed with the faint citrus of Judy's hand cream. The camera shutter clicked. Then, barely audible, Heather leaned in and whispered, Don't hug the baby. You smell like old people. It was a dagger wrapped in velvet. Judy froze, her hand still hovering mid-back. Heather pulled away, smiling like nothing happened. And Judy laughed, a hollow, brittle sound. Guess I'm overdue for a new perfume, she said aloud to no one in particular. But she saw it, out of the corner of her eye. Aaron, standing near the hallway with a juice pouch in hand, watching, hearing, and choosing, like he so often did lately, to do nothing. Not a flinch, not a frown, just a look away. Judy placed the plate of cake on a side table and made her way toward the hallway, the edges of her vision softening as noise dulled around her. She stopped briefly at the framed photo on the stairwell, Aaron, age 9, front teeth missing, sitting on her shoulders at the Oregon coast. A different boy, one who used to ask if she'd still be alive when he had kids. Now here he was, letting her be humiliated 2 feet from his child. She climbed the stairs slowly. Inside her bedroom, technically still hers, light filtered in through cream curtains she hadn't chosen. The scent of lavender dryer sheets replaced her favorite sandalwood sachets. She sat on the edge of her bed, closed her eyes, and waited for the sting to pass. It didn't. Instead, she stood, walked across the room, bent to the floor vent where her old cedar chest used to be. Now, a cream IKEA bench sat in its place. She reached under, felt for the notch in the floorboard, and pulled. The false panel came away in her hand with the smoothness of practice. A small metal key waited underneath. She crossed to the closet, opened the top cabinet, and unlocked a thin drawer. Inside, the deed. The name on it was hers and hers alone. Judith W. Myers, née Whitaker. She ran her fingers across the raised notary stamp. That house, the one Heather called ours, and Aaron called temporary until we're back on our feet, was not theirs. Not legally, not emotionally, not anymore. She pulled the deed out and laid it gently on her bedspread, then opened the nightstand drawer and removed an old envelope. Inside, a photo of her and baby Aaron sitting on the porch steps. He'd been teething. Her hair still had color. Back then, the house had been small but entirely hers, down to the peeling linoleum and leaky faucets. They'd shared cereal out of coffee mugs and danced to FM radio in the kitchen. And she'd thought, I've made a home that will never betray me. Now she knew better. Downstairs, laughter erupted over some baby game or gift. Heather's voice rose above the rest, high and polished. The guests chuckled. Aaron laughed along. Judy placed the envelope beside the deed. She shut the drawer again, but not all the way this time. Because when someone says you smell like age, what they're really saying is, I already buried you. Why are you still here? But Judy wasn't buried. Not yet. And she'd just remembered where all the shovels were kept. Eugene, Oregon, Judy's home, slowly becoming something else they'd said it was temporary. Aaron had used the word like a kindness, a favor. Just until Heather's new firm kicks off, he'd said, unloading boxes into her foyer 2 years ago. Judy had nodded, holding the door open as her son wheeled in a stroller, and Heather directed movers like a foreman with a blowout. That was before the hallway mirror vanished, before the reorganizing of the pantry and the decluttering of her sunroom, before her great-grandmother's needlepoint was replaced with an abstract canvas Heather claimed was more neutral for guests. Now the guest was Judy. The house creaked in new places, not just from age, but from accommodation, from shrinking. At first, she'd clung to routines, gardening in the morning, classical radio, crossword puzzles in pen. But slowly, her rituals had been edited. The lemon tree she loved was moved to make space for a pop-up play tent. Her antique teacups were boxed for safety. Heather claimed their mismatched patterns were too vintage chaotic for entertaining. And then there were the jokes. "You know how it is," Heather would chirp to friends, laughing. "We're just counting down until Mom's next milestone birthday. I hear 75 comes with a senior mute button." Everyone chuckled. Judy did too. But that night, she'd stood in the bathroom scrubbing her own scent off a towel Heather called muskier than expected. 2 days after the birthday party, Ruth came by for tea. Ruth had known Judy since their sons were both in middle school, before divorces, before arthritis, before memory became a luxury. "I brought lemon bars and gossip," Ruth said, waving a Tupperware like a victory flag. They sat on the back porch, mugs steaming, the wind tugging at the corner of Judy's sweater. "I think she's trying to erase me one chair at a time," Judy muttered, gesturing at the modern plastic patio set. "Then shake the damn tree," Ruth said, reaching for a lemon bar. "Let's see who falls out." Judy smiled. "You always go straight for the roots." "Because that's where rot starts," Ruth said, licking powdered sugar off her thumb. That night, Judy opened her laptop. She hadn't used it for much beyond recipe blogs and Scrabble in months. Now she typed Oregon trust law and started reading. Tab after tab, article after article. She saved contact information for an attorney downtown and bookmarked listings for private real estate consultations. Heather had a digital footprint like a politician. Judy found their Pinterest board, Our Future Dream Kitchen. Slate counters, brass fixtures, statement backsplash. Funny, nowhere in the caption did it say, "in someone else's house." The next night at dinner, the air had the same tension as overfilled balloons. Heather placed a stack of glossy brochures beside the sourdough bread basket. "So," she said, passing the salad with a performative smile, "we've been talking to a contractor. Nothing dramatic, just some light upgrades. Kitchen mostly. Maybe open up this wall?" Judy blinked. "You mean the wall that holds the house upright?" Heather laughed like that was charming. "Well, we'll bring in a structural engineer, obviously. Just want to modernize it, make it feel more ours." Aaron chewed silently. The baby smacked his tray. Judy reached for her water. "How lovely. When were you planning to ask me about this?" Heather tilted her head. "We assumed you'd be thrilled. This place has good bones. It just needs a little relevance." "Relevance," Judy repeated softly. "Yes, and it's not like we're strangers, Judy. We're family." Judy looked across the table, gaze steady on Aaron. "Are we?" He didn't meet her eyes. She nodded once and stood. "Excuse me. I forgot something upstairs." In her bedroom, she opened the drawer again, ran a hand over the deed. The paper wasn't thick, but the weight of what it meant, was undeniable. Heather wanted an open floor plan. Judy was about to give her one, only not the way she expected. Eugene, Oregon, Judy's home, one weekday afternoon turned tactical. The doorbell rang at 2:47 p.m. sharp. Judy peeked through the curtain. Vincent wore a charcoal sport coat, dark jeans, and a collared shirt open at the throat. Relaxed, but all business. He held a slim leather folder and a reusable coffee cup. "Ms. Whitaker?" he said as she opened the door. Judy smiled, already liking the feel of her maiden name in his mouth. "Come in, Mr. Marlowe. Let's be quick." Nap time ends in 40 minutes, and my kitchen isn't soundproof. Vincent chuckled softly and stepped inside. He took in the living room with a practiced glance, the mid-century fireplace, the crown molding, the newer furniture that didn't quite fit. "Original wood floors?" he asked. "Under the laminate," she said. "Paid out of pocket in '94. Kitchen reno in '03. Roof redone in 2011. I've got every receipt." They moved from room to room, Judy narrating like a docent in a museum only she remembered building. The breakfast nook still held pencil marks from Aaron's height milestones. The hall closet door stuck slightly. "Charles always meant to fix it?" she said, her voice flickering. In the upstairs guest room, now a nursery, she stopped in the doorway. The pastel animals on the wall weren't hers. Neither were the curtains, the rug, or the rocking chair. Vincent waited. "I used to write checks in this room," she said quietly, "for field trips, for asthma medicine, for overdue electric bills." Then she turned on her heel and led him back downstairs. In the dining room, she laid out a small stack of documents on the table. "I want it listed privately. No signage, no open house. Cash buyers preferred, and I want it in my name. My legal name. Judith Whitaker Myers." Vincent nodded. "Of course. Are you sure this is what you want?" Judy handed him the signed preliminary agreement. "I'm 72 years old, Mr. Marlowe. I've spent the last 2 years watching strangers arrange their lives around my absence. It's time I reintroduce myself." He looked down at the signature. "Most people list under the family name." "I'm not most people," Judy said, "and this isn't a family decision." In the sunlit kitchen, Judy poured them both tea. Vincent sipped, glancing at the garden. "You've got good bones here. This house has charm people pay for now." Judy leaned against the counter. "My late husband used to say the same." "Is that how the deed ended up solely in your name?" he asked carefully. She nodded. "Charles was a public school teacher. Smart, quiet. Trusted me with everything. Even the things I didn't know I'd need protecting from." A beat of silence. Then Vincent smiled. "He sounds like a man ahead of his time." "He was," she said, "just not ahead of Heather." They both laughed, an honest, belly-deep sound that startled her. She hadn't laughed like that in years. Outside the kitchen window, a curtain twitched. Judy followed Vincent to the door. As he stepped out onto the front porch, she extended her arms and hugged him. A warm, deliberate embrace. "Thank you," she said into his shoulder. "You're welcome," he replied, surprised but not uncomfortable. Upstairs, behind the guest room window, Heather stood in full view. Judy saw her, held the hug just 1 second longer, then stepped back, adjusting her blouse like a queen adjusting her crown. As Vincent walked down the drive, Judy pulled out her phone. She tapped out a text to Ruth and hit send. Clocks ticking. Then she glanced back at the house. It still looked like hers. But now, it felt like hers again, too. And soon, Heather would know exactly what relevance looked like. On paper. Judy's home. Late afternoon. Shadows growing longer, plans sharpening quietly. Judy found Heather in the kitchen, wiping the high chair with the aggression of someone sanitizing more than germs. The hum of the dishwasher filled the silence between them. "I noticed a few mail items were missing from the side table," Judy said casually, reaching for her tea canister. "Estate notices, tax summaries, a few things I keep track of." Heather glanced up, blinking twice like a performance cue. "Oh?" she said, feigning innocence with practiced softness. "I haven't seen anything unusual. Maybe Aaron moved them when he was tidying?" Judy smiled and stirred her tea. "Maybe." And that was all she said. No accusation, no rising tone, just a polite retreat back into her silence, the kind that camouflaged blueprints. That night she began the inventory. Her jewelry box was lighter than she remembered. 3 missing rings, none valuable enough to report, but meaningful enough to hurt. She scribbled notes in a spiral notebook, listing each item she intended to remove from the house. The list grew quickly. Charles's cufflinks, the gold locket from her mother, her wedding china packed into dish towels and placed in a box labeled craft supplies. At sunrise, she drove to a downtown bank and opened a safety deposit box under her maiden name. The manager didn't ask questions when she handed over the velvet pouches and notarized documents. By noon, the most important parts of her legacy were no longer inside the house Heather called home. Ruth came over the next day, balancing her handbag, a tablet, and 2 large lattes. They spread out at the dining room table like spies in a Cold War thriller. "We take Aaron out of the will entirely?" Ruth asked, sliding the revised draft across. Judy stared at the name, Aaron Charles Myers, next to a now crossed-out executor designation. She hesitated only once, then nodded. "He's not protecting me anymore. I've learned to do that myself." They added new beneficiaries, the local Meals on Wheels, an educational fund for displaced older women, a small trust for Ruth. "In case I get hit by poetic justice," Judy joked. Ruth didn't laugh. She just reached across and held her hand. That weekend, Judy visited a vintage shop 3 towns over. The owner, a woman with streaks of silver in her ponytail and 0 patience for haggling, paid cash for Judy's Limoges trinket box and a pearl brooch she hadn't worn since Charles's funeral. "Selling memories or making space?" the woman asked, counting bills into Judy's palm. "Both," Judy replied. By midweek, Vincent called. "We've got interest," he said, his voice crisp. "Cash buyer, quiet, reputable, wants to move fast." Judy didn't hesitate. "Move them faster." She hung up and stood by the upstairs window, the same one Heather once stood at while watching her hug Vincent. Below, the baby's toys were scattered across the lawn. A bubble machine whirred unattended. Aaron sat on the porch, scrolling his phone while Heather video-called someone, her voice loud, affected, performative. Judy didn't listen. She turned and opened the nightstand drawer. Inside, the original deed still lay where she left it. But now, beside it, was a manila envelope filled with everything Ruth had helped her prepare: the revised will, the asset list, the schedule for removal. She added a sticky note on top in tidy cursive, "In case they try to burn the house down, start with this instead." She returned the envelope to its place, shut the drawer with reverence, and pressed her palm flat against the wood. Not yet, she thought, but soon, very soon. Downstairs, the microwave beeped. The house had learned to live in her silence. Now it would learn how loud her absence could be. Eugene, Oregon. A Saturday morning disguised as any other, but utterly final. The ink dried before the teller had even capped the pen. "Congratulations," the bank manager said, sliding a copy of the finalized contract across the desk. "You're no longer a homeowner." Judy smiled as she folded the papers into her leather file. "Correction, I'm no longer their landlord." She tucked the folder into her tote, shook hands, and stepped out into the early morning glare. Heather's Instagram story had confirmed they were gone for the weekend, some retreat in Bend with a winery tour and matching flannel pajamas. The perfect window. She dialed Ruth. Green light. 10 minutes later, Ruth's battered Subaru pulled into the driveway, trunk already open. Together they moved in near silence, a choreography of purpose. The good china, the photographs, the journals and letters, all boxed with military precision. Judy's closet was stripped bare in 20 minutes, her bathroom emptied in 10. Charles's cufflinks were zipped into her carryall, still warm from where she'd tucked them under her pillow the night before. By noon, the garage was clean. By 2, the attic had been liberated. No tears, no drama, only sweat, sealed tape, and a pulsing heartbeat that grew steadier with each full box. 7 days, Vincent had said. That's how long until transfer of possession. Quiet keys, no ceremony. Judy had nodded. "I don't need a ribbon cutting, I need an exorcism." Mid-afternoon, while Ruth loaded another crate into the car, Judy passed through the office Heather had claimed as her work-from-home sanctuary. She opened the locked drawer, one she'd long suspected, and found exactly what she feared and expected: a folder thick with mail. Bank notices stamped "Final Request," a letter from her estate attorney, unopened, a reminder from the county assessor's office, addressed in bold, "Property tax reassessment enclosed." Heather had kept them hidden. Judy took photos of everything, back, front, and inside. She lined the documents on the desk like evidence at a trial, then calmly slid them into a manila envelope, wrote for my attorney on the front, and sealed it shut. Before she left the room, she whispered to herself, "I see you now." That night, Judy sat on the back steps, dusk curling around her like a shawl. Ruth poured them both tea. "You good?" Ruth asked. Judy stared at the house. "They buried me before I was gone. Thought they'd get away with the funeral. And now?" Judy raised her mug. "Now they're about to attend the wake, and I'll be the one giving the toast." She spent Sunday addressing 2 certified letters, one to Heather, one to Aaron, no flourish, just a copy of the sale agreement, legal verification of the eviction notice, and a single note in her own looping script. "You once promised to take care of me, so I did it myself." She dropped them in the mailbox and raised the red flag. The act felt biblical. That evening, Vincent called. "Buyers confirmed," he said. "Full payment wired. Possession in 7. "Anyone I should know?" she asked, half expecting some tech couple or house flipper. There was a pause on the line. "It's a nonprofit. They're converting the property." Judy's heart slowed. "To what?" "A senior-run community center," Vincent said. "Name's already chosen. The Whitaker House Silence." "I didn't know they were honoring you," he added quickly. "It wasn't in the listing. They must have found your name through the deed records. Said they wanted the space to be led by people who'd been dismissed too early." Their words, Judy stood still in the hallway, staring at the walls that had once heard lullabies, then later arguments over vegetable peelers and sleep training schedules. Her home, being reborn, not erased, transformed. "And they want me to be what?" she asked, the air gone thin. "Founding tenant and board member." Judy didn't respond right away. Her hand drifted to the staircase railing, old wood polished smooth by decades of grip. Finally, she said, "Tell them yes." Upstairs, in the quiet nursery that was never hers, the pastel wallpaper peeled slightly at the corner. Judy stepped inside, looked around one last time. She didn't take anything. She just turned off the light and closed the door. Not gently, but not cruelly either. It was the sound of finality, the echo of enough. Because when they came back from their weekend in matching flannel, what they'd find wasn't a home waiting. It was a woman no longer willing to be theirs. Judy's front porch, Monday morning, spring chill, and a storm rolling in fast. The SUV screeched to a halt, gravel spitting under the tires. Heather slammed the door so hard it rocked on its hinges. Aaron followed a step behind, holding the baby carrier like a shield. "Are you out of your mind?" Heather barked, striding up the walkway. "You sold the house? Without even telling us?" Judy stood on the porch with her arms folded, a cardigan draped neatly over her shoulders. Behind her, the front door stood half open like an invitation or a warning. "I told you," she said evenly. "I'd forgotten something upstairs." Aaron's voice cracked. "Mom, this is a mistake. This isn't how families handle things." Judy tilted her head. "Neither is hiding my mail or laughing while I'm humiliated in my own home. But here we are." Heather shoved a folded document toward her. "You can't do this. You're not well. You're clearly confused. This has to be illegal." Judy didn't touch the paper. "You're welcome to ask my lawyer. He's already spoken with the buyer, the notary, and the city clerk. Everything is airtight. There's nothing to contest." Aaron blinked. "But the kitchen—" "There is no kitchen," Judy said. "Not yours. Not mine. Just one that belongs to the Whitaker house now." Heather's mouth opened, ready for more fury, but she noticed something behind Judy's eyes. A stillness. Not passive, not weak. Inevitable. "You're seriously kicking us out?" she whispered, her voice trembling with performative disbelief. "I'm reclaiming square footage," Judy replied, stepping aside. "From people who were only ever renting space in—" "My patience!" Inside, Heather paced like a lioness in stilettos. Aaron stood at the base of the stairs, swaying the baby even though it had long since fallen asleep. "You can't evict family," Heather hissed. Judy handed over 2 white envelopes. "I can remove cohabitants not on the deed. These are your 72-hour notices." Aaron's face went pale. "Where are we supposed to go?" "Didn't you say your generation was all about adaptability?" Judy said softly. "Consider this your moment." 2 uniformed officers arrived the next afternoon for a civil standby. They stood just inside the threshold while Heather protested with crocodile tears and Aaron tried to negotiate with his old Eagle Scout charm. "Mom, please, we'll pay rent. Just don't do this. Not like this." Judy stayed behind the officers, arms crossed, breath steady. "You already did it like this," she said. "Every day you watched me disappear inside my own home and said nothing." Heather snorted. "So this is about a grudge?" Judy looked at her, calm as moonlight. It's about gravity. Eventually, everything falls back where it belongs." By sunset, boxes cluttered the driveway. The baby cried from a carrier as Heather screamed into her phone. Aaron sat on the curb, elbows on knees, head in his hands. Judy stepped out with a reusable grocery bag and held it out. Inside, 2 Tupperware containers of frozen casserole. "You'll need a few days before you find your next fridge," she said. Aaron looked up, startled. "Why are you giving this to us?" "Because I am not you," Judy said. She set the bag down beside him and walked back inside. Upstairs, she passed the nursery. Empty now, the wallpaper curling in one corner. She opened the window and let the air in. Oregon crisp, rain sweet. Her lungs filled with something she hadn't felt in years. Oxygen that didn't require apology. Downstairs, Ruth arrived with champagne. Judy met her at the door and nodded toward the street, where the SUV finally rolled out of the driveway, trunk dragging low. "They're gone," she said. Ruth popped the cork. "Not yet," Judy corrected, eyes locked on the mailbox. "Not until they get the real goodbye." And the next morning, Judy stood at the kitchen table with a final envelope addressed in black ink. Inside, a copy of the foundation papers for the Whitaker house, a donation clause that removed Aaron and Heather from any beneficiary status, a photograph of the deed, now in nonprofit hands, and a single card. 3 words, handwritten, "Surprise, your tenants." She sealed the envelope and smiled. Judy's home, mid-morning, emptiness echoing like peace. The silence was delicious. Judy stood barefoot in the center of her kitchen. No baby toys underfoot, no Bluetooth speaker pulsing toddler playlists. The air felt clean, like it had been waiting years to exhale. Ruth popped a second bottle of champagne and poured with flourish. "To freedom served cold," she toasted, then added, "and carbonated." They clinked glasses. Behind them, a lemon cake with thick buttercream sat on the table. Ruth had piped, "Congratulations on your eviction," across it in shaky pink script. Judy laughed as she cut 2 slices. "Somewhere out there, Hallmark is furious they didn't think of this first." They ate on the porch, wrapped in shawls. A breeze stirred the chimes Charles had hung decades ago, still tuned, still soft. Judy looked out across the now empty driveway. "I used to imagine dying in this house," she said, quietly, behind drawn curtains. "Invisible." Ruth sipped her champagne. "Instead, you just made national real estate history." Judy smiled. "Not bad for someone who supposedly smells like old people." That afternoon, she sat at the dining table with her laptop, the cursor blinking like a dare. She titled the post, "When the Family Home Stops Feeling Like Yours." She didn't hold back. She described the way it felt to shrink, inch by inch, room by room, the hollow smiles, the silence from her own son, the whispered jabs in the cupboards rearranged. She ended it simply. "The kindness you offer is not a license. It's a choice. And one day I chose differently." She posted it to her long-forgotten blog, then closed the laptop. By dinner, her inbox had exploded. Messages poured in from New York, Dallas, Boise. "I thought I was the only one. My daughter says I'm too stubborn to live alone, but she's living in my paid-off house. You didn't just get them out, you got you back." She responded to everyone, slowly, thoughtfully. It felt less like writing and more like witnessing. Vincent called 2 days later. "You have a fan club," he said. "Apparently your blog is making the rounds in real estate circles." Judy raised an eyebrow. "That a good thing or a lawsuit thing?" He laughed. "Very good. I just got off a call with a group that advocates for seniors navigating housing rights. They want to talk to you." "About?" "Speaking. Conference, Portland next month. Judy hesitated. I'm not a public speaker. You weren't a landlord either, Vincent said, until you were. Later that night, Judy sat in Charles's old recliner, hers now, and reread an old letter he'd written her during one of his teaching retreats. His handwriting always looked like it was rushing to catch up with his thoughts. Don't let the world make you smaller to stay liked. You're not meant for corners. And then this. Never let people take your kindness for weakness. They'll confuse politeness for permission. She folded the letter, placed it back in its envelope, and tucked it in the drawer beneath the phone charger. She had spent years mistaking endurance for grace, but now she knew better. There was a time for stillness and a time to make noise. The next morning, a manila envelope slid through the mail slot. Inside was a formal invite. Letterhead, logo, home power, advocacy for independent aging. She turned it over. Handwritten in the corner, panel keynote, housing and dignity, with Judy Myers. She stared at it for a moment, then folded it once, held it between her palms like a prayer. She wasn't invisible anymore. Not in her house, not online, and definitely not in Portland. She stood, stretched, and went to check the fridge. The eviction cake was still there, half-eaten, victorious. She pulled out a slice, because the next chapter would be served with icing. Portland, Oregon, conference hall, mid-morning, buzz of anticipation, then silence like a held breath. The microphone felt colder than Judy expected. She stood behind the sleek podium, her glasses low on her nose, notes spread in front of her but untouched. The ballroom was packed, rows of upright backs and kind eyes, some wet already. Legal advocates, caregivers, elders with soft gray hair and sharp memories. A few whispered her name like it belonged in a headline. The room stilled. Judy looked out over the crowd and began. I gave up a room, then a cabinet, then a closet. I gave up music during breakfast and then butter because it wasn't organic enough. I gave up space in the fridge, control of the thermostat, and eventually, my voice. She paused. I didn't lose a home. I was slowly erased from it. No one moved, not even the people pouring coffee near the back. She told them about the way Heather smiled while hurting her, about the day Aaron watched and said nothing, about the mailbox that never held her letters and the nursery she couldn't enter without a lump in her throat. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Truth has its own volume. She ended with a photo, projected on the big screen behind her, her porch at sunrise, empty rocker, tea steam. The caption read, "The day I chose myself." When she stepped down, the applause came like thunder, then tears, then a slow line of people wanting to shake her hand. Some brought stories, others just brought thanks. A woman with stark white hair held both of Judy's hands and whispered, "You said what I've been screaming in my head for 5 years." Judy squeezed her palms gently and said, "Then you're not alone anymore." 2 days later, her inbox overflowed again, this time with press inquiries, podcast invites, and messages from distant strangers offering to nominate her for things like 10 women over 70 who changed the game. She replied to none. But one email caught her attention. Local journalist, warm tone, attached clip from a Sunday human interest segment. Subject line, "Would love to feature the woman who reminded us what power looks like." Judy stared at the screen for a long time. She was wary. She'd used silence as armor for years. Now, shedding it didn't come without the tremble of exposure, but she also remembered what it felt like to be invisible. She agreed. On one condition, you tell it as it happened. No soft edges, no hero spin. Back in Eugene, Heather and Aaron were waging their own war. Screenshots, subtweets. Heather posted a filtered video from inside a borrowed apartment, tearfully explaining that Judy had been coerced and taken advantage of during a vulnerable time. Aaron chimed in from a shared account, calling the sale a betrayal by outsiders. They didn't tag Judy, but they didn't need to. People found it. Judy didn't respond, not publicly. She didn't have to. Vincent handled it. Quietly. He provided the journalist with notarized sale documents, timestamps, lawyer correspondence, and proof of full mental competency assessments Judy had voluntarily taken in advance of the transaction. No drama, just receipts. The feature aired on Sunday morning. The segment was 5 minutes long and devastatingly clear. Clips from the conference, an interview from Judy's living room, yellow walls glowing, Vincent's brief statement about housing dignity. Ruth's off-camera quote, "She didn't just reclaim her home, she reminded us what permission really costs." The screen faded to a title card. The Lady Who Sold Her Silence by Elise Martinez. Cug News. The phone rang non-stop. That afternoon, Judy led it. She poured tea, sat on her porch, and watched the light stretch across her steps like a runway. She had said her piece, and now the world had finally heard her. But the real reckoning still hadn't arrived. Eugene, Oregon, Judy's living room and law office downtown, slow-burn tension with a legal snap. It came on a Wednesday, tucked between a grocery coupon and a catalog she didn't subscribe to, a white envelope, legal header, Department of Adult Protective Services. Ruth was in the kitchen, slicing peaches when Judy walked in, paper trembling just slightly in her hand. "They've filed a claim," Judy said, placing the letter on the counter like it might bite. "Heather says I'm mentally unfit, that I was coerced into selling my home." Ruth didn't gasp, didn't blink. She wiped her hands and reached for the folder Judy had started months ago, labeled, "If they go low, we go to court." "Let's call Aaron," she said, "and wear something with buttons." Judy's lawyer had the kind of voice that made people recheck contracts twice. Aaron Duvall had been a probate attorney for 20 years, sharp as vinegar and just as cleansing. "She's playing the mental competency card," Aaron said, scanning the letter. "Textbook move, false claim of elder coercion. Ironically, it's more common in actual abuse cases when the abuser tries to flip the script." Ruth grunted. "Heather's not that clever. She just thinks she's the narrator." Judy didn't smile. "I want to do the evaluation," she said. "Voluntarily. No delay. Full testing." Aaron looked over her glasses. "Are you sure?" Judy reached into her tote, pulled out a printout of her keynote transcript, and slid it across the desk. "Let them measure my mind. They'll have to scale the mountain first." The evaluation was set for Friday. A quiet downtown office with too many succulents and a therapist named Dr. Hannah Chen. Judy answered questions about orientation, memory, arithmetic, story recall. She wrote down lists, interpreted metaphors, drew clocks. And then, in a moment that wasn't required but entirely her idea, she recited every medication she'd taken in the last 6 months, dosage, schedule, refill dates. "Impressive," Dr. Chen said, half smiling. "Not everyone's that organized." "I've had to be," Judy replied. "People mistake silence for surrender. But silence, it's just planning in disguise." That night, Ruth made pasta and opened a bottle of red. "You okay?" she asked over the rim of her glass. Judy nodded slowly. "I remembered something today. When Charles was being audited by the district, we spent 3 straight weekends sorting receipts, color-coded them, labeled every envelope. I kept saying, 'This is overkill.'" "And?" Ruth asked. He looked at me and said, "Better to drown in preparation than choke on surprise." Ruth raised her glass. "To drowning, then." They clinked. The results came in Monday. Clear, clean, no cognitive impairment, no indication of coercion or mental decline, psychologically sound, willfully independent. Judy received the official summary in an embossed envelope. She read it at the breakfast table, then folded it neatly into her foundation records folder. Later, Aaron called. "They'll try again," she warned. "People don't stop when they're out of options. They start swinging wild." Judy leaned back in her chair, the morning sun warming the side of her face. "Let them swing," she said. "But they'd better aim high." That afternoon, she walked down the block to check the community bulletin board. A new flyer had gone up. The Whitaker House, now accepting volunteers. Judy pinned a sticky note beneath it. In looping cursive, it read, "Built by strength, not borrowed time." At home, she logged into her blog again. Dozens more messages. One stood out, from a woman in South Carolina who'd read the news piece and written, "You didn't just survive, you stormed." Judy replied simply, "Sometimes surviving is the storm." But deep down, she knew the weather hadn't even turned yet. The storm was just beginning. Judy's legal office, police station, and her sunlit kitchen, lines drawn, then erased by truth. It began, as all things did now, with a knock on the door. Judy opened it to find Aaron standing there in a navy blazer and aviators, holding a folder thick with consequence. "She wants to smear you?" Aaron said, stepping inside. "Fine. Let's give her something sterile and fact-checked." They sat at the kitchen table, sunlight filtering through the sheer curtains. On the table between them, the defamation complaint paperwork, drafted and deadly accurate. "We're citing reputational damage, malice, and falsified statements to the public," Aaron explained. "This isn't a Facebook spat anymore. It's libel, and your case is pristine." Judy sipped her tea and stared at the photo on the counter. Young Aaron on her hip, cheeks sticky with frosting. "File it," she said, "and add this to the list." She slid across a flash drive, screenshot, messages, a voice memo of Heather on speakerphone, laughing about how old people don't know how to sue anyone. Aaron smiled. "They will now." 3 days later, a detective called. "Ms. Myers, we've verified the CPS report," he said, his voice clipped but respectful. "The complaint wasn't filed by a social worker, it was forged, ID stolen from a real caseworker in Salem." Judy's spine straightened. "And the person who submitted it?" "Heather's cousin, works in insurance, already confessed." There was a pause. "We're opening a criminal investigation into impersonation of a public official and filing a false report. Your daughter-in-law will be contacted formally." Judy didn't flinch. "Will she be charged?" The detective exhaled. "That depends on how much more we uncover, but her name's on the table now." Aaron showed up unannounced that Sunday. He didn't knock, just walked into the common room at the Whitaker house like he still had keys to her life. "I'm not here to fight," he said, palms raised. "I'm here to fix it." Judy looked up from the volunteer applications she'd been sorting. Aaron had dark circles under his eyes, the kind that only come from realizing your entire fallback plan has fallen forward, onto its face. "She's not well," he said. "Heather's spiraling. Maybe we all made mistakes, but don't you think it's gone far enough?" Judy set her reading glasses down with care. "You're not behind me," she said. "You're beneath what I raised you to be." He blinked. The air sucked from the room. "I'm not angry anymore," Judy continued, "but I'm awake. And you're still trying to lull me back into sleep." He didn't reply, just stood there, useless, like a man who'd finally run out of language. Judy didn't rise. "Close the door on your way out." The cease and desist letter was delivered the next morning. Vincent printed it on heavy linen stock. "To be dramatic," he said, smiling. Judy signed it without reading. She trusted Aaron's judgment, trusted herself. Heather's public commentary vanished overnight. So did her Instagram, and her last name, quietly scrubbed from several business listings. Judy didn't celebrate, not with champagne at least. She made a donation instead. $12,500, the initial payout from her civil claim, wired directly to a local legal fund supporting elder abuse victims in housing disputes. When Ruth asked her why she didn't keep any of it, Judy just said, "Because freedom doesn't need storage space." But later she found the thank you letter in her mailbox, signed by 3 women she'd never met, each of them now represented by lawyers she helped pay for. That evening the phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Myers?" said the voice, older, male. "I'm sorry to intrude, but I was your husband's financial planner. Retired now, but I recently received a ping from an account Charles opened nearly 15 years ago." Judy stood completely still. "I was only supposed to reach out if a specific key phrase showed up in the records, one he left in the event of a contingency." "It did. Something about house sold in silence." Judy's breath caught. "He left you a reserve account," the man continued. "Only accessible by you. It's valued at approximately $480,000. The room went soundless. All Judy could hear was the tick of the kitchen clock and the echo of Charles's voice, somewhere in memory. "Don't spend your years keeping the lights on for people who've already left the room." Her hand found the back of the chair, grounding herself. "Thank you," she said, voice steady. But in her chest, something roared awake, because she hadn't just won. She'd only just begun to spend what they thought she'd never own again. Power. Judy's kitchen, a financial office downtown, and a quiet walk through possibility. The digits blinked back at her, $480,153.27. Judy sat at the dining table, the same place where birthday cakes once cooled and eviction letters had once waited. This time, it was her laptop screen that pulsed with truth, an online login portal to a trust account she never knew existed, born from love and a long-ago suspicion. She scrolled through the history. No withdrawals, no activity, just growth, compound interest, and a name in the top right corner, primary access, Judith Whittaker, Myers, not Aaron. Not family trust, just her. That night the memory returned like a feather brushing her cheek. She and Charles had been folding laundry in the den. Aaron was still in college, already overdrawn again, already dismissive when Charles suggested a budget. "I don't want to sound cynical," Charles had muttered, folding a towel with aggressive precision. "But you and I both know who Aaron takes after when it comes to money." Judy had chuckled. "Heather's just ambitious." Charles had shaken his head. "She's opportunistic, and Aaron's too eager to impress people who cash their morals at convenience. So if anything happens to me, you'll have your own key." "Key to what?" she'd asked. He'd only smiled. "A door I hope you never have to open." The next morning, Judy sat across from a wealth planner named Simone, a woman with kind eyes and a blunt bob. She wore a steel gray suit and had the calm air of someone who managed crises in decimal form. "I want to convert the trust," Judy said, "not just into personal funds. I want to build something." Simone nodded slowly. "You have a specific cause in mind?" Judy slid across a document. "The Whittaker Fund, dedicated to elder housing sovereignty and survivor recovery." Simone scanned the proposal. "And beneficiaries?" "No family, not legally, not emotionally." Judy's voice didn't waver. "Remove Aaron's name. Remove any pathways for him to inherit so much as a stapler." Simone didn't argue. The paperwork took an hour. The freedom took less than 10 seconds to settle in her chest. That afternoon, someone rang the intercom at the Whittaker house. Judy answered, expecting a volunteer or Ruth with extra muffins. It was Marlene, an old friend of the family, one who hadn't visited in years. "Heather asked me to stop by," Marlene said, eyes flickering. "She said she just wants to talk. She's sorry. She's changed." Judy didn't step outside, didn't open the gate. "She's changed?" Judy said. "That's nice. So have the locks." Marlene fidgeted. "She says she's not asking for anything." "That's funny," Judy said, "because silence is usually her way of asking for everything." She pressed the intercom button and ended the conversation. Marlene faded from the screen like an old ghost, still trying to haunt a house that no longer mourned. Later, while Judy was trimming herbs in the garden, Vincent strolled up the walkway with 2 iced teas and a folder under his arm. "Off-market properties," he said, handing her a glass. "No pressure, but you've got the funds. You could get something truly yours." Again, Judy smiled. "Isn't this mine?" "Yes, but it's shared. It's for the community. I've seen how much you've given here. Maybe it's time you have something quiet, clean, with a gate." She took the folder and flipped through listings, craftsman bungalows, single-story cottages, even a tiny brick house on the outskirts of town with apple trees in the yard. "No shared walls," she murmured. Vincent nodded. "No shared sacrifices either." Judy looked up, the air golden around them. "I'll think about it." That evening, she lit a single candle in Charles's old lantern and set it on the porch. A thank you. Not just for the money, but for the warning. He'd known this day might come, and he'd trusted her to win it. As she turned to go inside, her phone buzzed. A message from Simone. "Legal transfer complete. You're now the sole trustee of the Whittaker Fund." She read the notification twice. then smiled, because now that the trust was truly hers, there were no more locks left to break, just doors waiting to open. Outskirts of Eugene, quiet street, dappled sunlight, and a front porch that felt like déjà vu. The gravel crunched under Judy's shoes as she stepped out of Vincent's car. Before her stood a single-story white bungalow with navy shutters, a sloped porch, and a weathered oak in the front yard that reached over the house like it was guarding something precious. She blinked. The past walked up to meet her. "I know that look," Vincent said beside her. "You've been here before." "No," Judy murmured. "But I've known it. This looks like my childhood house. The one in Coos Bay. Right down to the chipped mailbox." She stepped forward slowly. The front steps creaked like they were glad she'd come back. Inside, the scent of cedar and dust greeted her. A fireplace with scalloped tile, a narrow hallway with built-in bookshelves, a kitchen with mismatched drawer knobs, and the kind of stove that promised real food, not meal prep illusions. "I want it," she said before the tour had even ended. "Cash, no inspection contingency, no delays." Vincent smiled. "I already drafted the offer, just needed your word." "You have it," she said. And this time, no one else would. 2 weeks later, Ruth helped her unpack a crate labeled Pastels and Maybes. They set up Judy's easel in the sunroom, the one that faced the orchard where 3 stubby apple trees were already blooming in defiance of Oregon's cloudy threats. "I didn't know you painted," Ruth said, unwrapping a jar of brushes like it was a relic. "I didn't either," Judy replied. "Not for a long time." They hung the first canvas together, a watercolor of 2 hands letting go of a rope, titled in tidy pencil script, "Enough." In town, Judy joined a local artist co-op. The space smelled like clay and coffee, and the people wore paint like armor. They didn't ask her about Heather or Aaron. They asked her what her medium was. "Oil, mostly," she said, "but I'm learning to like mess again." She painted in silence most days, fruit, windows, sunrises, things she could control, but on a Tuesday afternoon, she sketched. Something different. A woman standing at a locked gate, holding the key and not using it. That one she didn't title. She just signed it. One evening, a familiar email address popped into her inbox. From Elise Martinez, Kyug News. Subject: podcast opportunity. Power reclaimed. Judy read the message twice. Elise wanted to create a 6-episode podcast featuring women over 60 who had reclaimed their homes, voices, lives. "You were the first story we ever told," Elise wrote, "and people still bring your name up. We'd be honored if you'd help us start this new chapter." Judy stared out the window. The porch light flickered on, automatic now. She no longer lived by fear of intrusion, but out of rhythm, routine, and permission she granted herself. She replied, "On 2 conditions. 1, I'm not your headline, I'm your warning. 2, we tell the messy parts too, the parts that didn't feel brave, just necessary." A minute later, Elise responded, "Deal." The next morning, Judy opened a fresh canvas, not for the podcast, for herself, a blank square of possibility. She didn't know what it would become, only that she wouldn't sketch softly anymore. This time her brush wouldn't whisper, it would speak. Kyug News Studio, late morning, headphones, glass walls, and a conversation decades overdue. The podcast room smelled faintly of coffee grounds and anxious sweat. Judy sat across from Aaron, separated by a slim table and a pair of condenser microphones. The headphones felt heavy, so did the moment. Heather had declined. Elise had told her gently. She sent a statement. Something about protecting her peace. Judy hadn't laughed. Now, Aaron cleared his throat for the 4th time in 2 minutes. His shirt was crisp, ironed within an inch of its regret. "Ready when you are," Elise said from the booth, her voice coming through the monitor like a distant conscience. Aaron smiled, camera-trained, soft-eyed, careful. "So," he began, "I want to say first that I love my mother. Always have." Judy said nothing. "I think what happened got out of hand. We miscommunicated. Heather and I assumed things we shouldn't have. I didn't realize how overwhelmed Mom was, or how much she felt pushed aside." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "If I could go back, I'd do it differently. But we were never malicious, just a family trying to live under one roof." Judy blinked once. Slowly, Elise gestured through the glass. "Whenever you're ready." Judy adjusted her mic, then pulled out a notebook, leather-bound, worn at the corners. "I'd like to read a few entries," she said. Aaron shifted in his chair. She flipped to a marked page. "February 3rd, Heather moved the lemon tree again, says it clashes with her patio aesthetic." Aaron said, "She's nesting." I said nothing. Again. She turned another page. "June 9th, Heather called my radio station depressing." Aaron laughed. I pretended I was hard of hearing. It felt easier than being honest. Another. "November 14th. I sat in my own car for 40 minutes today because I couldn't bear the sound of them laughing upstairs without me." Aaron's breath caught. "Mom." Judy didn't stop. "December 25th. I gave them space. I gave them silence. I gave them my pantry, my guest room, my rituals, and my name, and no one noticed." She closed the notebook. "You want a misunderstanding?" she said calmly. "But what you gave me wasn't confusion. It was clarity." Aaron swallowed hard. His eyes were rimmed red now. "I didn't see it that way. I didn't know it was that bad." "You didn't want to," Judy replied. "You thought I'd forget. But I remember everything." Aaron leaned in, voice cracking. "I'm sorry." Judy met his gaze and held it. Not angry, just resolute. "I didn't come here for an apology." She reached up, unclipped the mic from her collar, and set it gently on the table. It made a soft thunk like the closing of a book. Aaron's face crumpled. Elise's voice crackled faintly through the speaker. "Judy, are you okay?" Judy stood. "I'm not your segment," she said. "I'm your consequence." Then she walked out, head high, shoulders square, every footstep spelling freedom. Outside the booth, Elise turned to Aaron. "Do you want to keep going?" He didn't answer, just stared at the notebook still sitting on the table, open to a page dated 2 years before the house sold. A single line at the bottom. "Today, I disappeared one room further. Tomorrow, maybe I'll reclaim it." And now that she had, there was no room left for him to hide in. Judy's new home, a notary's office, and flashbacks folding gently into the present, like ribbon on a sealed box. The pen glided with no hesitation. Page after page, Judy initialed, signed, confirmed. Her full legal name, Judith Whittaker Myers, landed at the bottom of each paragraph like a flag planted on hard-won ground. Across from her, the notary flipped the final page. "And this is the updated beneficiary designation." Judy read it aloud, line by line. "To Ruth Kellerman, friend, advocate, and co-conspirator, 40% of my personal estate. To the Whittaker Fund for Elder Housing Sovereignty, 40%. To the Myers Endowment for Displaced Grandmothers and Kinship Caregivers, 20%. She paused at the bottom. Beneath the signature line, one sentence sat alone. "All previous designations, including family heirs, are void." The paper didn't bleed when she signed it, but it cut clean. Later that day, Ruth brought over baked pears and 2 envelopes. One was from the Oregon Bar Foundation, confirming Judy's charitable trust had been officially recorded. The other held a news clipping, printed out and circled in red Sharpie. "Look," Ruth said, placing it in Judy's lap like a holy document. "It's official." Judy read the headline aloud. "Heather Myers found guilty in public impersonation case, sentenced to probation, record permanent." The photo beneath it showed Heather exiting the courthouse, chin tilted high, but not high enough to disguise the sentence she now carried everywhere, like a watermark on every job, loan, and second chance. Judy didn't gloat, didn't smile. She just folded the clipping and tucked it under her tea coaster. "Consequences," she said softly, "are rarely loud." That weekend, she visited the town library, met with a publisher, and handed over her finished manuscript. The title was stitched across the cover in bold, unapologetic serif. "Don't hug me. Watch me inside" were pages of memory, not just from the podcast, but from the silences in between. Chapters with names like The Sound of Empty Cabinets and How to Paint Without Permission. The last line of the book read, "This isn't revenge, it's recovery." Vincent came by on Tuesday with a square wooden crate. "Frames," he said. The good kind. For your online shop, Judy had reluctantly agreed to sell her art, but now the watercolor titled Enough had already sold 3 prints. A piece called Threshold, an open door with no shadow, was featured on a local gallery's website. Orders were trickling in. People love stories, Vincent said, but what they crave is proof. She hung reclamation above her reading chair. It was abstract, violent strokes, deep reds, a single gold line through the center. Ruth squinted at it that night. "What's it mean?" "It means," Judy said, sipping tea, "I'm not waiting for closure. I'm framing what's left." Flashback. The old kitchen, humming with Charles's off-key singing. Ruth laughing over spilled gravy and lawsuit drafts. The first pastel Judy ever finished, apples and fury side by side. The moment she locked the nursery door for the last time. Aaron's silence like fog. Heather's Instagram tears, the porch light of her new house flicking on by schedule. Not survival. Each scene sharp, each breath reclaiming. The night before her book went to print, Judy stood at her mailbox, holding the first copy. The binding was warm from the delivery truck, the pages smelling like ink and finality. She opened it, scanned the first dedication page, for those who were told to stay quiet until they stopped existing. "You're not ghosts. You're Flint." She was about to go inside when her phone buzzed. It was a text from Elise Martinez. "Podcast episode just dropped. Your sit-down is live, already trending." Judy smiled, but before she could reply, another message came through. Unknown number. Just 2 words. "I heard." She stared at the screen. No name. But she didn't need one, because ghosts don't text. But suns do. Portland Convention Center. Late morning, full house, Oregon sun waiting just outside. They handed her the mic with trembling reverence. Judy stepped onto the stage in a navy wrap dress, hair pinned back, silver earrings catching the light. The ballroom swelled with quiet before the first word fell. Audience lined in folding chairs, some holding tissues before a syllable was spoken. She adjusted the mic, exhaled once, and began. "I don't believe age earns you anything. Not love, not gratitude, not even respect." Murmurs rippled, surprised, expectant. She let them settle. "Respect," she said, "isn't owed to age. It's owed to humanity. And if someone forgets your humanity because your hair grays or your hands shake, it's your job to remind them. You were never a guest in your own life." Applause. First cautious, then thunderous. She spoke without slides. No notes, just story. She talked about forgetting herself in the kitchen she paid for, about watching her grandson grow from a distance of permission, not welcome. She talked about silence as survival, and then as a weapon, but what she didn't talk about was revenge. "I didn't evict anyone," she said. "I reclaimed space, starting with my own lungs." By the time she stepped off stage, 3 people were crying openly. One woman clutched her adult daughter's hand like it was a relic. Another mouthed "thank you," as if Judy had personally saved her mother. Backstage, Ruth waited. "You didn't just get revenge," she said, her arms wrapping around Judy in a rare, full hug. "You built something. Hell, you're still building." Judy leaned into it. "Turns out spite makes a decent foundation." "Only if you decorate with grace," Ruth replied. On the green room table sat a bouquet of wildflowers, sunbursts and cream roses in a cobalt vase. The note read, "From the Realtor you hugged." Still in awe. Judy smiled. That hug had been real once, after the final paperwork, after the last door closed behind Heather. She had embraced Vincent not as a broker, but as the man who returned her name to her deed. As she left the venue, a young woman stopped her just outside the exit. She looked barely 20, dressed in scrubs, ID badge still clipped to her collar. "Mrs. Myers?" she asked. "You don't know me, but I just texted my grandma." Judy blinked. "She raised me. I haven't called her in 2 weeks. I forgot how people disappear quietly." Judy reached out, squeezed her hand. "Now you've remembered." The girl nodded, eyes shining. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Judy said. "Just remember longer next time." She walked down the steps and into the Portland sunlight, purse in one hand, book tucked in the other. The air held no apology, just the kind of warmth you carry, not chase. No crowd followed her. No camera rolled. Just her feet, steady. Just her shadow, short and sharp. Just the rustle of the program in her bag. She passed a planter of hydrangeas, let her fingers brush one petal. And in that moment, utterly alone, fully seen, Judy whispered to herself the final line no one had earned but her. They said I smelled like age. She paused, let the breeze move her scarf like punctuation. But I was wearing the scent of power.